Welcome to 28storms.com. This is your tropical weather update for June 5th, 2011. The National Hurricane Center is still monitoring 94L Invest, which is the area of low pressure located near Jamaica. As of the 1 p.m. Central Time advisory or outlook, they have a 40% chance of tropical development in this area over the next 48 hours. This is a slight increase from yesterday. At this time, it was 30%. Their latest surface map shows a stationary 1007 millibar surface low located just to the southwest of Kingston. Here is the latest Atlantic visible image, and as you can see over the last 24 hours, 94L has become much better organized. The low-level circulation is located still a bit to the west of the main area of convection, and the low-level circulation is in this general area, and we still have some slight westerly shear along with some mid-level dry air. But the overall appearance has become a lot better defined over the last 24 hours. This can also be seen on the latest enhanced infrared, and as you can see, the latest convection is a lot closer to the low-level circulation compared to yesterday. Here is the latest zoomed-in visible floater imagery, and we can start to make out a weak low-level circulation just to the west of the convection. It is very broad in nature still because, as you can see, it's stretched out across several tens or possibly over 100 miles from west to east, just west of the strongest convection. Surface observations in the area continue to indicate a very broad area of low pressure. Still nothing too focused, and unfortunately we still don't have enough surface observations in this area, and of course that's going to continue. But the latest 850 millibar vorticity analysis shows that the strongest vorticity is around where we're starting to see that more defined low-level circulation in the latest visible. Ever so gradually, the upper air environment becomes a bit more favorable with every single passing day. The upper level ridging has become a lot more prominent near Jamaica and surrounding areas of the central and western Caribbean. As we can see on the latest shear tendency analysis, the wind shear values have dropped below 20 knots in many areas. Yet we still have this strong area of upper level troughing located over Cuba, the western Bahamas, and southern Florida, with wind shear in excess of 30 to 50 knots. We can see the overall evolution of the pattern a lot better on the latest water vapor animation, and as you can see, that upper level trough that's been over much of the Caribbean has now advanced northward quite a bit over the last 3 to 4 days and is now located more so over the Bahamas, and that's thanks to the presence of this upper level low located over the central and southwest Gulf of Mexico that has helped to push this upper level ridging a bit more to the northward, giving this tropical disturbance a bit more room to intensify. Here is the latest SIMS low-level steering analysis, and you can see the reason why this area of low pressure has not moved much over the last several days. It's caught between two main steering factors. One is the subtropical ridge located over the southeast United States, and the other continues to be a deep long-wave trough over much of the central Atlantic. It's not quite enough close to either one of these particular systems just yet for them to take over, and therefore it's been nearly stationary between the both of them. But now several of the dynamical models are showing a slight westerly motion over the next 48 hours, thus allowing the subtropical ridge to become the dominant steering parameter. Here is the latest guidance from the Tropical Model Suite, and as mentioned yesterday, several of these models are not that reliable. However, it is worth noting that the models are beginning to trend more toward the northwest in the general direction of the Isle of Youth and the southeast Gulf of Mexico. The following is today afternoon's run of the 12Z GFS forecast model. We're still looking at sea level pressure. As we can see, our broad area of low pressure is located to the south of Cuba, near Kingston. And as I set this in motion, the GFS still refuses to develop this storm into a tropical cyclone. But if you closely monitor the progress of the broad area of low pressure, it is now taking the majority of the system into western Cuba and the southeast Gulf of Mexico by days 6 and 7. Here is the 850 millibar vorticity analysis. As you can see, the core of the vorticity begins to move more toward the northwest into the southeast Gulf of Mexico. In the meantime, a few pockets of secondary vorticity maximums also continue to move north, more than likely due to some southwest shear ahead of that upper level low that continues to sit nearly stationary in the central and western Gulf of Mexico. This is the latest shear forecast from the GFS model. As you can see, the model is correctly advertising the presence of the upper level ridging now present over the central Caribbean, and it correctly also analyzes the troughing that's still in place over southern Florida and the greater Antilles. One difference between this model and some of the more aggressive models solutions over the next week or so is that the GFS continues to pump upper level low heights over the eastern Gulf of Mexico, thus enhancing the upper level trough throughout the period. As you can see, this trough stays in place throughout the next 7 days, which is going to increase the wind shear, or at least keep it at the same levels that it has been over much of the western Cuba and southeast Gulf of Mexico region. Thus, the reason why this storm is really not forecast to intensify based on this model solution. The latest Canadian solution has become aggressive once again. As I set this into motion, you will see that the low pressure area develops quite robustly as it crosses the Isle of Youth and becomes a significant tropical cyclone as it advances northwest toward the Florida Panhandle by day 6. Not to be overly concerned, however, because as noted in prior videos, the Canadian is oftentimes way too aggressive with the development of tropical cyclones, but nevertheless it is still worth noting. You can see the overall track a bit better using the 850 millibar vorticity, and throughout the period the low eventually advances into the southeast Gulf and continues to intensify. And here's the latest shear forecast from the Canadian, and the upper level ridge does steadily advance more toward the north in association with the system, thus the reason why the storm is allowed to intensify much more based on this model. The next model solution is the 12Z run of the ECMWF, and as I go into what this model shows, I'll also explain why the overall model consensus is now taking this storm into the southeast Gulf of Mexico. This is the current time, and this is the 500 millibar pattern. As we can see, we still have subtropical ridging over much of the central Gulf Coast, with the deep long wave trough over much of the central Atlantic. But the ECMWF and several of the other models are advertising a fairly progressive pattern. As we advance this into motion, we'll see that this trough over the central Atlantic begins to advance off toward the northeast, and thus naturally this subtropical ridge that was once over the central Gulf of Mexico eventually is allowed to get shifted a bit east as well into the east coast of the United States. Therefore, the overall steering pattern over the northwest Caribbean will be from southeast to northwest, allowing this area of low pressure to make it through a weakness in the subtropical ridge more toward Florida. This is by day 5, and the storm is now beginning to cross western Cuba. Still not as a tropical depression or storm based on this run. In fact, this is a fairly weak area of surface low pressure, and by 144 hours you can still make out where that low pressure area is located. It's passing just west of Key West, Florida, and by day 6 it is now over central Florida. The 12Z UK Met is also in general agreement with the other models. This is the current time. 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, continuing to move west-northwest as the area of ridging, not only at the mid-levels but also near the surface, begins to build off of the coast of the Carolinas. Now we're still looking at the UK Met solution, but in order to get the rest of the model we had to change sources. But this is still 72 hours. As we can see, the 1008 millibar surface low is just south of Cuba at this time, and as I advance this into day 4, we continue to see the low pressure tracking toward the Gulf of Mexico. Day 5 now in the southeast Gulf, day 6 turning more toward the north, all in general agreement with the rest of the forecast model. Finally, we'll take a brief look at the Navy no-gaps model. Keep in mind this is so just to summarize, 94L has become a bit better organized over the last 24 hours. That'll be a trend that we'll have to continue to monitor. The National Hurricane Center does have a reconnaissance flight scheduled for tomorrow if the system continues to look more and more impressive. And over time, this will have a chance to become a tropical depression or tropical storm as it moves into the northwest Caribbean. At this point, it looks like the probability of that happening is still about 50-50. There's still a lot of negative parameters that's rooting against the potential for development. But if some of the models are correct, if this upper level low can stay far enough away, the low currently over the central Gulf of Mexico, we might see a small pocket of favorable upper level winds over the northwest Gulf of or northwest Caribbean as the system continues to move on off toward the Gulf of Mexico. And finally, the overall model consensus is for a very slow track over the next 5 to 7 days in the general vicinity of the western coast of Florida. But again, that's still very far out. We'll still have to monitor what the models decide to do over the coming days. But overall, this long wave trough that's currently over much of the western Atlantic should continue to slide east while a subtropical ridge begins to move out of the southeast United States and begin to anchor itself closer to the United States east coast. So thanks again for visiting 28storms.com. Don't forget to also follow us on Facebook or our YouTube channel, and please stop by again soon for more information.